How about this? So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about there was a report by the Hollywood Reporter that was very disputed at the time, which said that the original plan for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show / movie would have included the return of Darth Maul. And this was sort of disputed even within the story, even within the Hollywood Reporter story. There was one source saying, "What? No, that was never the case. That was never going to happen." And after it came out, there were some, let's call them snide comments from some of the folks that work over at Lucasfilm, and not without reason. There's a lot of BS that gets written about Star Wars. So that was that. So it was sort of an odd story in that regard. Deborah Chow was asked about it by Total Film. She, of course, directed the entire series. And this is what she says. "As long as I've been involved, we've never had Darth Maul in any of it. Dave Filoni did a beautiful job of telling that story already. For anybody trying to tell a story in the middle of these two trilogies, there's only certain elements that made sense where Obi-Wan is." Adding that while Maul failed to make the cut, Vader did not. With a lot of legacy aspects, the decision to bring Vader into it was not made lightly. We're 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. Where is Obi-Wan's starting place? What has been important to him in his life? Anakin and Vader are huge and profound parts of his life. We ended up feeling that he made sense telling this story, and Vader casts such a dark shadow in this that to have Maul as well, it might have felt a little bit much. So I think there's a little bit of wiggle room here for both for what Deborah is saying to be true, but also for it to have been true that at one point Maul was considered for this story. And it's the very first thing that she says. "As long as I've been involved."
Yeah.
Because as I think, Ben, you mentioned earlier, this show wasn't always a show.
That's right.
It was originally a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a movie that came out, that would have come out after Solo, which reincorporated Darth Maul. So they had Ray Park all ready to go with the makeup and the lightsaber and all that. And Sam Witwer doing the voiceover. All of that stuff was all in there, all ready to go. And then they decided to change course. And I think we heard somewhere that it was Dave Filoni's idea to have the Inquisitors be in there. Am I making that up? Does that sound right to you guys, or am I making
that makes sense. If it's not right, it should be.
Yeah. Okay. So So I think probably what happened was they scrapped the movie and said, "Let's rework this into a show." Also, at that time, they would have been getting The Mandalorian up and running, so Dave would have been in the live action world, and he might have been able to look at the story and go, "Hey, wait a minute, guys, I already did this on Rebels, so I don't know, maybe we need to come up with something else." And that's when they brought in new writers, and that's when they brought in Deborah Chow to direct, and they reworked the story. And as we talked about when we talked about who the writers are for this show, the first couple of episodes still share a screen credit with the guy who would have written the movie, if I'm not mistaken. So I think probably the movie and the show start in a very similar place, obviously, with Obi-Wan on Tatooine, and probably whatever is the MacGuffin that gets him out into the universe, probably very similar. But at some point they diverge, and the Deborah Chow story is the Vader story, and what would have been the movie story probably would have incorporated Maul, and may well have overwritten Rebels a little bit, or found some way to tie in with it, or something. When it's funny, that same week that the Darth Maul story came out was right around the same time that we first started seeing stuff of the Grand Inquisitor, and it's like Rebels might have been this close, to being overwritten in the canon, which doesn't mean it's not good. Doesn't mean it's not good. Doesn't mean it's not a worthy show to watch, but it wouldn't have been canon or completely canon. But instead, it winds up having two of its major villains having not insignificant roles in the show, and having its status as canon confirmed or maintained. So it's interesting stuff.